The throne room shattered. Not physically, though Captain Marcus Chen wished it had. Physical damage he could handle. Physical damage made sense. But reality itself was peeling away at the edges, showing something underneath that human eyes weren't meant to perceive. The Valkyrie royal court froze as impossible colors bled through the air, as gravity forgot which direction it preferred, as the temperature became a concept rather than a measurement. Marcus stood perfectly still. 20 years of combat had taught him that when the universe stopped making sense, movement was suicide. The young princess, barely into her equivalent of adolescence, stood 3 meters away, her 4 eyes wide with terror she was trying desperately to hide. Her crystalline skin had gone pale, almost translucent. Good. She should be afraid. 10 seconds ago she'd been laughing at him, mocking the primitive human assigned to guard the treaty signing, calling him a realm-locked savage who couldn't perceive beyond his own dimension. Then she'd touched him, not aggressively, playfully. A dismissive tap on his chest plate with one of her delicate, multi-jointed fingers. The kind of gesture that said, "You're beneath my notice." The realms had screamed in response. Now the air tasted like copper and starlight. Marcus could see through the palace walls into spaces that shouldn't exist. Vast chambers filled with geometric impossibilities, creatures made of living mathematics, storms of pure concept howling through voids between thoughts. The barrier between dimensions was tissue paper thin and getting thinner. The queen moved. Everyone else was still frozen, nobles, guards, diplomats from a dozen species. But Queen Salmithia rose from her throne with the fluid grace of something that had lived far too long to be surprised by anything. Her eyes, all 4 of them, they were locked on Marcus with an intensity that made his combat instincts scream warnings. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, the Valkyrie queen knew what he was. "Clear the room." Her voice was quiet. In any other species, that would have meant weakness. In Valkyrie royalty, whispers were more dangerous than screams. Now. The court moved as one, flowing toward the exits with practiced efficiency. No one questioned. No one hesitated. Even the human diplomatic contingent, who'd spent 3 months negotiating this treaty, evacuated without protest. Only 3 figures remained: Marcus, the Queen, and Princess Calvareth, who was shaking now, her skin flickering between solid and translucent as the dimensional instability worsened. "Mother, I didn't—" the princess started. Silence. Still quiet. Still terrifying. The queen descended the dais steps, each footfall precise and measured. "Do you understand what you've done, daughter?" You disrupted a binding that has held for 217 of his world's years." The queen stopped 3 steps from the bottom, her gaze still fixed on Marcus. "Tell me, Captain Chen, how many realms have you walked?" Marcus's throat was dry. The truth was classified at levels that didn't officially exist. 3 governments had kill orders ready if he ever spoke about it. But the queen already knew, and lies would only make this worse. 7, Your Majesty. Counting this one. The princess gasped. The queen's expression didn't change, but her primary eyes narrowed slightly. The Valkyrie equivalent of profound shock. "Impossible," Calvareth whispered. "No one survives more than 3-dimensional crossings." "The consciousness fragments, the body breaks," the queen finished. "Yes, under normal circumstances." She took another step down. "But Captain Chen is not normal, is he?" "He is bound." Marcus could feel it now. The binding she was talking about. The thing that had been done to him 2 decades ago, when a black ops experiment had gone catastrophically wrong, when he'd been shattered across 6 realities simultaneously and somehow impossibly pulled back together. The scars ran deeper than flesh. They ran through the fabric of space-time itself, stitched with something that shouldn't exist. "Your casual touch," the queen continued, addressing her daughter without looking at her, "disrupted those scars. You created resonance, and now the realms are trying to reclaim what was stolen from them." As if to emphasize her point, Marcus's left hand flickered. For a fraction of a second, it existed in 2 places simultaneously, here and somewhere else. Somewhere dark and cold and screaming. He clenched his fist, forcing his physical form to stabilize. Pain shot up his arm like lightning made of broken glass. He didn't make a sound. "Can you hold it?" the queen asked, not mocking, genuinely questioning, for now. Marcus's voice was steady despite the agony radiating through every nerve. "But if the cascade continues, the binding will fail. When that happens, The 7 realms will attempt to occupy the same space simultaneously, the Queen finished. The resultant dimensional collapse will vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius, possibly more. Mother, I didn't know. How could I have known? He's just a human. The Queen's secondary eyes finally shifted to her daughter. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees. Just a human, she repeated softly. The species that somehow survived 3 extinction-level events through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The species that crossed the void between stars using chemical explosives and mathematics. The species that looks at the impossible and sees only a problem to be solved. She descended the final steps. You have lived a mere 40 cycles, daughter. And in all that time I have learned one absolute truth. Never underestimate a species that weaponizes hope. This one was worse. For a full second, he existed partially in a realm where physics was a suggestion and geometry was hostile. Something with too many teeth noticed him. He forced himself back, but the effort left him swaying. The Queen was suddenly beside him, moving faster than something her size should be able to move. Her hand hovered near his shoulder, not quite touching. "How long?" she asked quietly. 15 minutes. Maybe 20. Marcus met her gaze. All 4 eyes were ancient and sharp. "Your Majesty, you need to evacuate the city." Unacceptable. She turned to her daughter. "Calvareth, tell me exactly what you felt when you touched him." The princess was crying now, tears that crystallized before they hit the floor. "I felt everything. All the places he'd been. All the things he'd survived. It was like touching a star that had been shattered and welded back together with dirt." She looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. "Mother, his mind should be scattered across dimensions. He should be a drooling husk. How is he even standing?" "Because I'm too stubborn to die," Marcus said. Another flicker. Worse, his right leg disappeared up to the knee, replaced by something that existed at angles that made his brain hurt to perceive. He gritted his teeth and pulled himself back. "And because I made a promise." "What promise?" the Queen asked. "To never let the realms take anyone else." The words came out rough. "To hold the line, no matter what it costs." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that made Calvareth gasp in shock. She bowed. Not deeply. Not subserviently, but a clear, unmistakable bow of respect from a monarch who had ruled longer than most species had existed. "Then we will honor that promise together, Captain Chen. Because you are correct. I do know what you are. And I know why you came to this treaty signing." Her smile was sharp enough to cut. "You weren't here to guard us. You were here to guard us from yourself. You knew the dimensional proximity to our realm-walking technology might destabilize your binding. You came anyway because the treaty mattered more than your safety." Marcus said nothing. Confirming would violate about 30 different security protocols. The Queen's smile widened slightly. "Your silence speaks adequately." "Very well. We have perhaps 12 minutes before catastrophic failure. I know of one possible solution, but it requires trust." "What kind of trust?" "The kind where I reach directly into your dimensional scars and attempt to reweave them before the cascade becomes irreversible." Her 4 eyes glinted. "The kind where, if I make even the smallest error, your consciousness will be dispersed across 7 realities simultaneously, experiencing infinite death in infinite variations until the heat death of all universes." Marcus looked at the Queen, at the ancient intelligence in her gaze, at the steady hands that had ruled an empire spanning 4 dimensions. Then he looked at the walls, still bleeding impossible colors, at the floor where gravity was starting to forget itself, at his own hands, which were flickering between solid and scattered with increasing frequency. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. The Queen's smile became something almost warm. "What you have always done, Captain. Survive. Not the clean pain of a bullet wound, or the sharp clarity of a broken bone." This was existential suffering. The sensation of being unmade and remade at the fundamental level, of having his consciousness stretched across impossible distances while remaining tethered to a single point in space-time. The Queen's hands, all 4 of them now, revealing the hidden manipulator pair that Valkyrie royalty rarely showed, wove through the air around Marcus like she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. But she wasn't touching air. She was touching the scars, the places where reality had been torn apart and stitched back together with desperate science and darker things. Marcus had been ordered to kneel, not for ceremony, Standing would have been impossible when she started. Now he was on both knees in the center of the throne room, hands braced against the floor, every muscle locked rigid as the queen worked. "The binding is remarkable," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Whoever performed this had access to technology far beyond what humanity should possess. Valkyrie techniques. Cardin probability threading, Voidwalker essence manipulation. Her primary eyes narrowed. And something else. Something I cannot identify. Something old. Good. Marcus couldn't have given one if he wanted to. The entity that had helped stabilize his shattered form 2 decades ago had never given its name, had never asked for payment, had simply looked at him with eyes that had seen galaxies die and said, "You will hold the line between what is and what should not be. This is not a gift. It is a burden. Bear it well." Another wave of displacement hit. Marcus existed briefly in a realm of pure sound where thought was music and matter was rhythm. The queen's hands moved faster, pulling him back, weaving the fraying threads tighter. "Mother, his resonance is increasing." Calvereth stood to the side, her 4 eyes wide with fear and fascination. "If you cannot stabilize, then we die," the queen said calmly, "as will everyone within 50 kilometers. Perhaps you should have considered that before mocking a warrior you knew nothing about." The princess flinched but said nothing. Marcus's vision split. He could see the throne room and 3 other places simultaneously. In one, vast machines the size of moons harvested dying stars. In another, creatures of living crystal sang songs that rewrote the laws of physics. In a third, darkness absolute and total, the space between universes where nothing should exist but somehow did. "Focus, Captain." The queen's voice cut through the chaos. "Your mind is fragmenting. Think of one thing. One memory. One anchor. Hold it." Blood ran from his nose, his ears. His body was trying to occupy 7 states of existence simultaneously and failing at all of them. One memory. There. He seized it. A moment from the original experiment. The containment field failing, reality shattering like glass. The sensation of being everywhere and nowhere, and then, impossibly, gravity reasserting itself, his lungs remembering how to breathe, his heart deciding to beat again. Someone had screamed his name, called him back from the infinite dark. Dr. Sarah Chen, his sister. She'd violated every protocol, torn through security barriers, and physically grabbed him while he was mid-displacement. She should have been scattered across dimensions along with him. Instead, somehow, her touch had been an anchor. A point of absolute certainty in a universe of chaos. "You don't get to leave me alone with Mom and Dad's restaurant," she'd whispered while he was still gasping on the floor, reality slowly solidifying around him. "I can't make dumplings worth shit, and you know it." He'd laughed. Despite the pain, despite the horror, despite the knowledge that he'd been fundamentally changed in ways he didn't yet understand, he'd laughed. The memory held solid. Real. True. The queen's hands moved in a complex pattern, and Marcus felt something shift. The fraying threads of his dimensional binding weren't just being pulled tight, they were being rewoven, strengthened. The queen was incorporating Valkyrie techniques into the existing structure, creating redundancy where before there had been desperate improvisation. "Interesting," she murmured. "Your binding was created as an emergency measure, yes? A way to prevent total dissolution?" Marcus managed to nod. Speaking was beyond him, but it was never meant to be permanent, never optimized. "You have been existing in a state of barely controlled catastrophe for..." She paused, reading something in the dimensional scars. 19.3 years. Remarkable. Most species would have lost coherence within days. Another displacement wave. This one felt different, less chaotic. The queen's reweaving was taking effect. Marcus could feel the structure solidifying, the wild fluctuations dampening. "The human capacity for endurance continues to astound," the queen said. "You have been in constant pain for 2 decades, maintaining a binding that should have killed you within hours, and you not only survived but continued to serve, to fight, to guard treaties between species that barely acknowledge your existence." "Someone had to," Marcus ground out. The words cost him, but they were important. The realms don't care about politics. They'll take anyone. Everyone. If the boundaries fail, the entirety of known space collapses into dimensional chaos. Yes, the queen's manipulation became more precise, more delicate. The Valkyrie have fought 3 wars to prevent exactly such a catastrophe. We lost millions. And here you are, a single human, holding back the same force that required armies to contain. Not holding it back. Marcus's vision was clearing slightly. The other realms were retreating to the periphery instead of overwhelming his senses, just keeping the door closed, making sure nothing gets through. A door. The Queen's expression was unreadable. You think of yourself as a door, not a weapon, not a tool. A barrier. Protection. That's what soldiers are. Protection. When Marcus managed to focus on her, he saw her crystalline skin had returned to its normal color, but her eyes, all four of them, were fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The arrogance of youth, the Queen said quietly, is believing that experience and age grant superior understanding. My daughter thought you were primitive because your species has not mastered realm walking. She failed to consider that perhaps your species has not mastered it because you understand the danger better than we do. That perhaps restraint is a form of wisdom we have forgotten. The Queen stepped back, lowering all four hands. The displacement stopped. Not gradually, completely. One moment Marcus was fragmenting across 7 realities. The next he was simply here, solid, singular, present. He gasped, nearly falling forward. The pain remained, but it was different now. Not the screaming agony of dimensional shearing, but something more like deep bruising, manageable, survivable. The binding is stable, the Queen announced. I have reinforced it with Valkyrie probability anchors and incorporated resonance dampeners into the existing structure. You will no longer experience random displacement events under normal circumstances. Marcus looked up at her, understanding slowly penetrating the exhaustion. You didn't just stabilize it, you fixed it. I optimized an emergency solution that never should have remained active for 20 years. She regarded him steadily. You will still feel the realms. You will still be aware of dimensional boundaries in ways others are not. But the constant pain, the random displacement events, the slowly increasing probability of catastrophic failure, those are ended. Couldn't find words adequate for what she'd just done. The Queen seemed to understand anyway. You stood ready to die to prevent harm to others, including those who had mocked you. Including my daughter, who earned you protection through treaty obligation, despite treating you with contempt. She glanced at Calvarith. Honor recognizes honor, Captain Chen, regardless of species. The princess stepped forward hesitantly. Her 4 eyes were bright, the Valkyrie equivalent of tears. I didn't understand. I thought... She stopped, started again. I am 40 cycles old, in my people's measure, barely adult. I have been taught that humans are young, reckless, crude, that your species achieved space travel through luck and determination rather than proper understanding of dimensional mechanics. That's not entirely wrong, Marcus said. His voice was rough but steady. No, Calvarith agreed, but it is incomplete. My teachers never mentioned that determination in the face of impossible odds is itself a form of strength, that crude methods which work are superior to elegant methods which fail. She performed a gesture with her manipulator hands, a formal apology in Valkyrie culture. I insulted a warrior who has fought horrors I cannot imagine. I mocked a protector who bears burdens that would shatter my mind. I dismissed a soldier who came here knowing the danger to himself, knowing that proximity to our realm-walking technology might kill him, and came anyway because peace mattered more than safety. She lowered her hands, meeting his gaze directly. I am sorry, Captain Chen. My words were cruel and my understanding shallow. I offer no excuse except ignorance, which is explanation but not justification. The apology was formal, precise, and completely genuine. Marcus could hear it in her harmonic undertones, the additional frequencies Valkyrie used to convey emotional truth beneath their words. Accepted, he said simply. The Queen nodded once, a gesture of approval. You recover quickly, Captain. Most beings would require hours to regain coherence after such an experience. You are already standing. Marcus looked down. He was somehow on his feet. He didn't remember rising, but his body had apparently decided that kneeling was complete and combat-ready posture was required. 20 years of training. Even dimensional collapse couldn't override it completely. The treaty signing, he said. How long? 6 minutes have elapsed since I cleared the room, the Queen said. Your diplomatic contingent is likely panicking. Mine is certainly wondering why I evacuated the throne room for a simple disruption incident. It wasn't simple. No. The Queen's smile was sharp. But they do not need to know that. What happened here remains between the 3 of us. Agreed? If word spread that a human soldier had nearly caused a dimensional catastrophe in the Valkyrie capital, the treaty would be dead. The carefully negotiated peace that had taken months to arrange would collapse in hours. Humanity would be branded too dangerous to interact with, too unstable to trust. Agreed, he said. Mother, Calverth started, will speak no word of this, the Queen finished. Not to your siblings, not to your tutors, not to your friends. This is not a request, daughter. It is a command sealed by royal decree. You will take this knowledge to your grave, or I will ensure that grave comes sooner than naturally scheduled. The princess's skin paled again, but she nodded quickly. Yes, mother. I understand. Good. The Queen moved toward the throne, her gait returning to the measured ceremonial pace of royalty. Captain Chen, you will need approximately 15 minutes to fully stabilize. I will delay the resumption of the signing ceremony appropriately. Use the time to compose yourself. There is a medical station beyond the western door if you require it. I'll be fine, Your Majesty. She paused at the base of the dais, glancing back at him. Of course you will. You are human. Fine is what you do, while impossible is what you accomplish. A beat. It is a remarkable species trait, deeply frustrating for those of us who prefer predictable variables, but remarkable nonetheless. Then she was ascending the throne, every inch the ancient monarch, and the moment of casual observation was gone as if it had never existed. Marcus moved to the western door, his body responding normally despite the residual ache in his bones. The medical station was small, private, and stocked with supplies from a dozen species. He ignored most of it, settling for water and a basic pain suppressant that probably wouldn't do much but gave him something to do with his hands. Calvereth followed him. She didn't ask permission, simply entered and stood near the door, her 4 eyes tracking his movements. You don't have to, Marcus started. My mother commands that I speak of this to no one, she interrupted. She said nothing about leaving your presence, and I have questions. Marcus drank half the water container before responding. I probably can't answer most of them. Try. She moved closer, her crystalline skin refracting the light into subtle rainbows. When I touched you, I felt 7 realms. But I also felt something else, something between them. Watching, waiting. Her voice dropped. Something that noticed me. Marcus went very still. You shouldn't have been able to sense that. But I did. Because your scars connect to it, don't they? Whatever holds your binding together, whatever keeps you from fragmenting completely, it's not technology. Not entirely. Her manipulator hands twisted together, a gesture of uncertainty. What is it, Captain? What saw me through your eyes? He could lie. Should lie. This was classified information that had gotten people killed for knowing, but she'd felt it herself. Denying would be pointless. I don't know what it is, he said carefully. The scientists who created the original binding tried to stabilize me using dimensional anchoring technology. Wasn't enough. I was still fragmenting, still dying. Then something else intervened. Something that existed in the spaces between realities. It offered to help. What did it want in return? That's the thing. Marcus set down the water container. It didn't want anything. It just looked at me and said I would hold the line. That I would be a barrier between what is and what should not be. Then he gestured vaguely. It stitched me back together with parts of itself, with its essence, I think. I don't have better words for it. Calvereth's skin had gone almost white. An entity that exists between dimensions, that can manipulate reality at the fundamental level, that gave part of itself to save a single human soldier without asking for payment. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you understand how insane that sounds? How impossible. I was there. I know. No, I mean... She stopped, started again. Entities like that don't help. They consume. They corrupt. They destroy. Every species knows this. The things that live between the realms are predators at best, incomprehensible horrors at worst. They don't save people out of kindness. Maybe this one was different. Or maybe you are. She met his gaze, all 4 eyes intent. Maybe it saved you because you were worth saving. Because it looked at a human soldier who was willing to die protecting people he'd never met, and decided that was something precious, something to preserve. Marcus had no answer for that. He'd spent 20 years trying not to think too hard about why he'd been saved, about what the entity had seen in him that was worth the cost. The pain, Calverth said quietly. My mother said you've been in constant pain for nearly 20 years. Was it very bad? Bad enough. Marcus checked his reflection in the polished metal wall, making sure the blood was cleaned away, that his uniform was presentable, but manageable, and it reminded me every day that I was still here, still human, still holding the line. That's horrific. That's survival. He turned to face her fully. Your mother fixed it, though. The constant displacement, the random shifts, she stabilized everything. I don't know if you understand what a gift that is. She does not give gifts, Calverth said. She makes investments. She saw something in you worth preserving at optimal efficiency, rather than barely functional stability. A pause. She is very old, Captain Chen. Very wise. And very rarely impressed. The fact that she bowed to you, even slightly, even briefly, that is extraordinary. I have never seen her bow to anyone outside formal diplomatic ceremony. Marcus remembered the moment. The ancient queen inclining her head to a human soldier, acknowledging something she saw that others didn't. She recognized a fellow protector, he said. Someone else who holds the line. Yes. And I insulted you, called you primitive. Mocked your inability to perceive beyond your own dimension. I was wrong in every possible way. You were young and arrogant. It happens, my mother would say. That youth is no excuse for cruelty. That arrogance untempered by wisdom is simply malice with pretension. She performed another formal apology gesture. I will not ask for forgiveness beyond what you have already granted, but I want you to know that I will remember this lesson. We'll remember that strength takes many forms, and that humanity's greatest weapon may not be technology or numbers, but your absolutely unreasonable refusal to give up even when the universe itself demands surrender. A Valkyrie attendant, their skin formal neutral gray. Your Majesty requests your presence, Princess. The ceremony resumes in 4 minutes. Calverth nodded, then looked back at Marcus. Will you be well enough to stand guard? I'll be fine. Of course you will. She moved toward the door. Paused. Captain Chen? Thank you for not letting my foolishness kill everyone in the capital. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in the medical station. He allowed himself 30 seconds of stillness, of processing, of feeling the absence of pain that had been his constant companion for 2 decades. The binding was stable. The queen had fixed what was never meant to last. He could feel the difference, the clean precision of Valkyrie probability anchors, integrated with human desperation and something older than both. The entity between the realms was still there. He could sense it at the edge of perception, patient and watchful. It had been part of him for so long that its presence was almost comforting. You still hold the line, it seemed to whisper, though it spoke no language and had no voice. And now you do so unburdened by constant collapse. Use the gift well. I will, Marcus said to the empty room. Then he straightened his uniform, checked his weapon, and walked back to the throne room with the calm precision of a soldier who had survived the impossible and would do it again tomorrow, if necessary, because that's what humans did.
They endured. The treaty signing proceeded without incident.
Marcus stood at his designated position, 3 meters behind the human diplomatic contingent, eyes scanning the room, hands relaxed but ready. To any observer, he was simply a ceremonial guard, impressive in his formal military uniform, certainly, but ultimately decorative. Only 3 beings in the room knew different. The queen sat on her throne with perfect poise, her 4 eyes occasionally flickering in his direction with what might have been approval. Calverth stood with the other royal family members, her crystalline skin occasionally catching the light and sending rainbows across the marble floor. She didn't look at Marcus directly, but her posture had changed. Before, she'd held herself with the casual arrogance of youth and privilege. Now there was something more measured in her stance, more aware. Ambassador Wei, the lead human negotiator, was speaking about mutual cooperation and shared prosperity. The words were carefully scripted, translated into 17 languages simultaneously, and utterly meaningless beyond their diplomatic weight. What mattered was the signing, the formal acknowledgement that humanity and the Valkyrie Empire would cooperate rather than compete for the resource-rich systems in the disputed border regions. 3 months of negotiation, countless compromises, all of it nearly destroyed because a princess thought it would be amusing to mock a guard. Marcus felt no resentment about that. Calverth was young. She'd learned. That was enough. The signing began. Ambassador Wei placed her biometric signature on the quantum-locked treaty document. It glowed briefly, confirming her identity and authority. The Valkyrie diplomatic lead did the same, their 4 hands moving in the complex pattern required by their law. Then the queen descended from her throne. This was the crucial moment. The treaty required royal confirmation, the personal seal of the Velkhari monarch. Without it, the entire document was just optimistic paperwork. The queen moved with measured grace, each step precisely timed. She reached the treaty table, all four eyes scanning the document with the kind of attention that had kept her alive and in power for 3 millennia. Then she looked up, directly at Marcus. The room went quiet. Not obviously. The low conversation continued. The diplomatic personnel kept moving, but there was a shift in attention. Everyone suddenly very aware that the ancient queen was staring at a human soldier. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice carrying across the room without effort. "Approach." Training and discipline overrode confusion. He crossed the space between his post and the treaty table, stopping at appropriate formal distance, coming to attention with the crisp precision of military protocol. "Your Majesty," he said. "This treaty establishes cooperation between our species," the queen said, her four eyes still locked on him. "It promises mutual defense, shared resources, cultural exchange, and diplomatic unity." These are words on a document. They mean nothing without trust. She extended one primary hand toward him. "Open." The room held its breath. Marcus understood immediately. This was a test, a demonstration. The queen was offering contact, the same kind of casual touch that had nearly triggered dimensional catastrophe an hour ago. If he refused, it would signal that humanity feared the Velkhari, that the treaty was built on anxiety rather than genuine partnership. If he accepted, he was trusting that her optimization of his binding would hold, that the reinforced structure would prevent the kind of cascade resonance that had nearly killed everyone earlier. He thought of Sarah. Of the restaurant she was probably running right now, blissfully unaware that her brother had almost been scattered across 7 dimensions. Of the promise he'd made to come home for her birthday next month. Then he thought of what his sister would say if she were here. Probably something like, "Stop overthinking and just shake her damn hand, Marcus." He reached out and took the queen's hand. Nothing happened. No displacement. No cascade. No reality-shearing agony. Just the simple physical sensation of contact between two beings. Her crystalline skin was cool against his hand, textured in ways human skin wasn't, but solid. Real. Present, the queen's four eyes glinted with something that might have been satisfaction. "Trust," she said simply. Then she released his hand and turned back to the treaty document. Her seal glowed as she confirmed it, a complex pattern of light that encoded her biometric data, her royal authority, and her binding oath to uphold the treaty's terms. The document shimmered, locked, and transmitted simultaneously to every government archive in both human and Velkhari space. It was done. The room erupted in polite applause. Diplomats congratulated each other. Aides rushed forward with prepared statements for the media. The machinery of political theater ground smoothly into motion. Marcus stepped back to his post, his hand still tingling slightly from the contact. Ambassador Wei found him afterward during the reception. She was a small woman, barely reaching his shoulder, with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "That was interesting," she said quietly, accepting a glass of something blue and luminescent from a passing server. "The Queen specifically requesting you approach. Making physical contact. That wasn't on the ceremony agenda." Diplomatic improvisation, Ambassador. Diplomatic improvisation with extremely specific target selection. She sipped the drink, made a face, set it on a nearby table. "You're good at your job, Captain." "Very good. But you're not senior enough or politically significant enough to warrant that kind of attention from a 3,000-year-old monarch." Marcus said nothing. "I'm not asking you to violate classification," Wei continued, "but I am noting that something happened in that throne room during the evacuation. Something that changed the Queen's assessment of you specifically." She glanced at him. "Should I be concerned?" "No, Ambassador. The treaty is secure." "That's not what I asked. It's the answer I can give." Wei studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Just remember that if you ever need diplomatic support for classified complications, my door is open. Metaphorically speaking. My actual door is usually locked because people keep trying to bribe me." She moved away to engage with a group of Velkhari nobles, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The reception continued for another hour. Marcus stood at his post, watched the room, and felt the absence of pain with something approaching wonder. 20 years. He'd lived with a constant low-grade agony for so long that he'd forgotten what normal felt like. Now he remembered. Calvareth approached near the end of the event. She moved casually as if simply wandering through the crowd, but she ended up standing next to him with a precision that suggested planning. "My mother is pleased," she said quietly, not looking at him. "The treaty is signed. Humanity and the Velkari Empire are now formal allies." "That's good. She is also pleased that you trusted her optimization of your binding, that you were willing to risk contact to demonstrate that trust to the assembled witnesses." A pause. "She says it was exactly the kind of gesture a protector would make, risking personal danger for diplomatic gain." Marcus watched the crowd, tracking movement patterns, assessing potential threats. "It wasn't a risk. Your mother knows what she's doing."
But you didn't know that. Not with absolute certainty.
"Yet you reached out anyway." Culverith finally looked at him, her 4 eyes bright. "Thank you, Captain Chen, for protecting us. For protecting me, despite my earlier cruelty. For being exactly what my mother said you were." "What's that?" "Humanity's greatest strength." She smiled, a complex expression involving multiple facial planes that somehow conveyed genuine warmth. "The unreasonable refusal to surrender." Then she was gone, rejoining her siblings across the room. The reception ended. The diplomatic contingent prepared to depart. Marcus stood at his post until the formal dismissal, then made his way back to the human quarters in the embassy section. His communicator chimed as he was removing his formal uniform, a text message from an unlisted number. "The binding is stable. You will require quarterly checkups to ensure continued optimization. Arranged through diplomatic channels, -S. Queen Salmithia." Marcus smiled slightly and deleted the message. Then he opened a different communication line and typed quickly, "Still alive. Treaty signed. Everything fine. See you next month for your birthday. Don't make dumplings without me." Sarah's response came back almost immediately. "You better not be bleeding when you say fine. I know your definition of fine. Not bleeding. Actually, not in pain. It's weird. Marcus Chen. Explain." "Classified. But good classified. Trust me." "Then, I do trust you. But you're still making dumplings with me and explaining everything that isn't classified until I'm satisfied you're actually okay. Deal?" He set the communicator aside and looked out the window at the Velkari capital. The city glowed with bioluminescent architecture, towers of living crystal reaching towards stars that looked subtly different from Earth's sky. He was 700 light-years from home, standing on a world that existed partially in 4 dimensions, serving as a guard in a diplomatic mission that had nearly ended in catastrophic disaster. And for the first time in 20 years, he felt like maybe he could actually do this. Not just survive, but live. Actually live instead of simply existing between displacement events. His communicator chimed again. Another unlisted number. "You may not remember, but you promised once to hold the line between what is and what should not be. Today you held that line while learning to trust others to help you bear the weight. This is wisdom. This is growth. Well done, Marcus Chen." The message dissolved as he read it, the text literally evaporating from the screen. The entity. The thing between realms that had saved him 2 decades ago. Marcus looked at his hands. Steady. Solid. Singular. "Thank you," he said to the empty room. There was no response. But the air felt warmer somehow. Approved. He slept that night without nightmares. Without displacement events, without waking up screaming as reality tried to pull him apart. Just sleep. Deep and restful and human. When he woke, the sun, not Sol but this world's star, was rising over the crystal towers. He had duty in 4 hours. Reports to file, security protocols to review. But first, he sat on the balcony with synthetic coffee that was trying very hard to taste like Earth's version and failing spectacularly, and he watched the city wake up. Somewhere below, Princess Calverith was probably being lectured by her mother about the responsibilities of royalty, about respect and consequences and the weight of words. Somewhere in human space, Sarah was opening the restaurant, probably cursing at the ancient rice cooker that never worked properly and refused to be replaced because it had been their parents. Somewhere between the realms, an entity that had no name watched over a soldier who'd become a living bridge between realities and found this acceptable. And Marcus Chen, Captain Earth Defense Coalition, survivor of dimensional shearing and bearer of scars that ran deeper than flesh, drank terrible coffee and felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of someone barely surviving. The quiet, steady hope of someone who'd found stable ground and could finally build something lasting. The treaty was signed, the binding was optimized, the line held. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New threats, new responsibilities. But today Marcus Chen was fine. Actually, genuinely, impossibly fine. And that was enough.